I will be enlisting in the Korean army in 3 days.
He looks good, and he's got a really nice voice. Bruh. Already simping, man. Hello there, it's your favorite half Japanese, half Pakistani. Today, I'm gonna react to half Korean, half Indian guy. And I wanted to also see if I can relate to him. He lived in China, was born in China, but he was of different race. I've got some Indian YouTube audience, and also I know you guys like some Korean boys, so it's best of the both worlds, so why not react to it? Anyhow, let's begin then.
My name is Himang, or Himang with a G at the end. It actually means something in both languages. I am half Korean, half Indian. I was born and raised in Beijing, China. I am going to college in America, but currently in Korea on a gap, and a long gap because I will be enlisting in the Korean army in 3 days.
He looks good, and he's got a really nice voice. Bruh. Already simping, man.
在楼下买了一杯茶，喝了一口。上一次遇到你，好像过了很久。
So my parents were very, they put a lot of thought into my name, and they wanted it to mean something in both Korean and Hindi. And so they picked a word that meant something in both languages, and that was Himang, and Himang in Korean obviously means hope.
That's sweet.
Literally the word hope. And it's actually Hanjao, and in Chinese is Sivang. And Hindi apparently has multiple meanings, but one of them means of the Himalayas. And that's from my dad's side of the family is from a village in northern India, close to the Himalayas, like very close to Nepal. So Himang means of the Himalayas.
Oh my god, that's deep, man. I mean, the meaning of the name is pretty deep. Like, it's like also in Chinese, also in Korean, also in Hindi. His parents big-brained his name, man.
They met in Beijing. My mom was studying Chinese there, and my dad was working there, and actually he was working in Chinese media. And
Wait, was your dad a radio host?
I don't know if he was a host. I think he was an editor.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, he's more of a writer than like a on-camera person. They have a little bit of an age difference. They're 8 years apart. My mom's younger, and my mom was a student at the time, and I think they met through a Chinese friend. They got married here.
In Korea?
Yes.
Okay.
Just for the ceremony.
Yeah.
And then they went back and had me, had my brother.
So you were born in China?
I was born in China. Both my brother and I was born in China, but we're not Chinese citizens. They don't give out citizenships like that in China. I think they have enough people.
Is it really the case? I didn't know that actually. That even if you're born there, you still wouldn't get the citizenship for that country. China be pretty strict, man.
I feel like you're just tossing little shades here.
No. The Indian community is definitely a lot smaller.
His mom is cute.
Than the Korean community.
I'm sorry.
Which is why I don't speak Hindi. I didn't have that environment to practice with.
So why did your parents choose to stay in China? What was the reason for that?
I think the biggest reason is probably because at the time when they first moved to China, there weren't many foreigners in China at the time.
Right.
And so I think it was a very tight-knit community.
Yeah.
And they were also obviously very close with the Chinese community as well. And I think they just liked that vibe. And I think it worked well for them. Korea, however, I visited every year, almost every summer, for at least 2-3 weeks. And also I attended a Korean church back in Beijing, so I've always felt closer to my Korean side. And I feel like the only connection I have to my Indian side is food and Bollywood movies.
Which is pretty nice to
Yes,
have, I have to say.
I mean, Indian food and Bollywood is the most famous thing. I mean, I think most people have experienced it. I was brought up in Pakistan, so of course I came across more of the Bollywood side of things. Indian food is more, I guess, the combination of Pakistani and Indian food. I mean, it's kind of, there's a thin line between what's Pakistani food and what's Indian food, so whatever you can say.
Yes, but it's been a long-term goal of mine to learn Hindi. Actually, no. Not long term, considering my short lifespan thus far. I was not as interested when I was younger. It didn't seem that cool to me when I was younger. I think it's just because I wasn't exposed to many Hindi-speaking people around me, whereas Korean.
I understand him because I had this similar experience as being brought up in Pakistan. As I said, I wasn't exposed to the Japanese side of things. I wasn't able to speak that much Japanese, and it's also my long-term goal that I actually become fluent at speaking Japanese. Nihongo wa pera pera ni naritai.
I heard all the time.
Sure, yeah. It was part of your community.
Exactly. I think that's why I kind of refused it when I was younger. But now, now that, especially after I've been to the States, where I've been interacting with more Indians or Indian Americans or people from all around the world, actually, I feel, I feel like I want to be part of the conversation too.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important to learn about both your roots.
Growing up, did you have a certain perception of what being Indian meant? Because to give an example, me growing up, I always thought I knew, like, oh, this is Korea, this is Korean, this is how Korea is today. And a lot of the Korean culture that exists in the States and certain pockets is rather old-fashioned. It didn't evolve like it does here. And so coming to Korea some years back, to me was like, wait a second, this is not what I expected Korea to be like. Growing up, did you have a certain perception, like, oh, India must be like this is what Indian people are like? And then as you get older, the more you learn, are there things that surprise you?
I think a lot of my perceptions were reflected by like the Chinese or Korean perceptions of India.
I actually want to hear him speak Chinese now. Like, I don't know how his Chinese would be because I've been exposed to a lot of Chinese people. I have stayed with many Chinese people, so that's why I want to just hear him speak Chinese.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, for example?
For example, like eating with hands, or like just, I think India is definitely, while there are a lot of similarities, still very culturally different, whereas China and Korea are a lot more similar comparatively. And I think definitely India definitely has an element of exoticness to East Asians.
I mean, it's a very long history,
Yeah.
and there's so many different types of people groups and languages and cultures existing just within one country. So no
many
wonder.
Languages. I think I've just felt a distance with my Indian side, and I don't keep in touch with it as much as I should have or should. But we're working on it.
Why the change? Why the change of like you said should? Who instilled that sense of I should? Was it just something you thought of, or have you felt this pressure?
I think I feel the pressure because I have and I will be traveling around the world, and people will perceive me in different ways in different places, and I think it's important for me to know the history of those places in order to understand or react appropriately to those perceptions.
So people expect you to be indulged in the other culture. Oh, you must be multicultural. Yeah, I am multicultural, but I'm not like, I didn't live 6 months in Japan and then I lived 6 months in Pakistan, so I don't really have the equal cultural awareness. So people expect mixed race half people to actually know both cultures perfectly, which is not the case, if that makes sense.
Like, for example, I've been in the States for a year, just like through a lot of different cases of discrimination and different movements and forms of activism. I've noticed that I have been very privileged in a lot of ways because a lot of different reasons. Because I speak English, because I am light brown, I guess you could say, or just that I was fortunate enough to be raised in an environment where my cultures have been embraced. And so I think in order to understand people that didn't have that opportunity, I need to learn more about the histories behind my Indian side, both my Korean and Indian side. But it's difficult because I only just got to Korea now, and there's so many things that I'm trying to learn about Korea here. and yeah, it's still a long way to go.
Sure, I feel like it's really like a whole life journey. Just as much as cultures and languages, you can't ever know everything about it. Sometimes I feel like for ourselves as well, we are like infinite, ever-expanding universes. It would be impossible to be like, I know every aspect of my life and culture and family. And so that's part of the journey.
I mean, actually, I just realized life would be even harder for him because he's actually, as the video is titled, The Third Culture, he was brought up in China. So he must relate to Chinese culture more than the other two cultures. And you know, people might come to him like, oh, you know this much about Korea? Do you know this much about India? And then he would be like, and then, you know, the expectation kind of puts you off.
I did,
Okay.
but I also attended a Chinese local school, public school, when I was younger. And so I actually attended a Chinese kindergarten first, and preschool and kindergarten, and then up until 2nd grade, I was in the local Chinese public school system. And I think I would say back then, I was pretty integrated into the local Chinese culture. And I would say back then, Chinese was my first language, and I spoke like a native.
Yeah.
And people would always be really impressed. I would say I felt pretty Chinese back then.
Oh, really?
I think so. My mom would tell me stories of when I was in kindergarten. Kids would call me Lao Bai, which means, I guess literally translates to old foreigner, but it's not really derogatory. It's just like a slang for people that are not from China. My mom said, I don't remember this, but my mom said that I used to like question my mom and be like, why are they calling me Lao Bai? Like, I was born here, I speak Chinese, and like I understand everything just like everyone else. I don't understand why they are excluding me this way, but I don't think I was ever targeted or bullied for it, which is a very fortunate
Sure.
thing.
You know, appearance is one of the... He looks East Asian, more East Asian than me. You know, when you're in East Asia, because it's not as multicultural, so people wouldn't really see you as that one nationality. Like in Japan, if I go there, or anyone who's a foreigner, they would call them gaijin. It's literally translated to foreigner. So, yeah.
But during the same time, we were also living in a very internationally diverse environment. We lived at a hotel actually for a few years up until I was like 4 or 5 years old. I think I also kind of realized who I feel most comfortable with around. And I think for me, although I love socializing with everyone, I think the most comfortable group of people that I feel safe around and good around are people like me. My closest friends are mostly Asian, but that are somewhat westernized through international schooling.
So I understand what he's saying. He's saying that he is more comfortable with people who are multicultural, know about different cultures already. And because I also feel the same. I was also in boarding school where I came across different nationalities like Polish, Chinese, Bulgarian, Georgian, Moldovan, and stuff like. So it's easier to talk with and relate with people who already have this sense of multiculturalness, I guess.
That speak both English and Chinese, or both English and Korean, or all three. All three would be the best. Because I actually struggle. I feel like I struggle to communicate with just one language, and there's always. I always have another language to fall back on if I can't think of a word.
So it seems that you have kind of, I don't know if the word is like flitted between certain groups, you know, here with Chinese community, here with Korean community, maybe also with Indian community, or more like American community. And I often have felt, at least for myself, depending on the context that...
Where is she from? Her accent. I can't pin it. It's probably she was also in an international community, so she doesn't have a strong accent from anywhere.
I am in. It can change the way I think or view myself, because you're hearing perceptions from other people or what other people look at you and say, and that can really, in a way, it can bring self-awareness. it can also make you doubt yourself, right? It's all part of this growing up and exploring who you are and who you want to be. In your case, you have encountered in a short amount of time so many different contexts. How has it affected you and the way you view yourself, or the kind of person that you think you are, who you want to be? Has it had any impact at all?
Yes, and there are a lot of different aspects that I've noticed that are viewed differently in different contexts. Things like, it could be things like even like body image or
that's interesting.
Or self-confidence.
Yeah.
I think are viewed very differently in different cultural contexts. And there are vastly different standards as well. And I think that's very interesting to look into, but I think growing up in it, I think it was definitely difficult at times to feel the need to conform to a certain standard.
So if you look at him, he's clearly conforming with the East Asian look, or the Korean look, you could say. He's got like the dyed hair, put them back, a band. Again, what he's saying is actually showing up as well. For myself, like in these past years, I haven't conformed to any communities especially because in being in London, you get to meet different cultures. So you don't have to really fit in with one culture, especially here. But like when you go back to East Asia, it's a different case. Chinese beauty standards, Korean beauty standards, Japanese beauty standards are really high, and you have to be this slim, your face must be this small or whatever, man. It's hard. East Asian life is hard.
East Asians view Honyars, for example. I think people have a stereotype of Honyars that are like very beautiful, and I feel like still a lot of East Asians' idea of mixed Asians are mixed Caucasian Asians, and obviously that to a certain extent conforms to a European beauty ideal.
Yes, that's right, and it's also perpetuated by the media.
And
So whole of the beauty standard is actually Eurocentric, and it's hard to go against it.
I think I think a lot of times I wasn't viewed as beautiful as like I needed to be as a mixed person to my peers. But then there will also be like a lot of adults who are like, oh, 진짜 잘생겼다, you know. So it's also different between different generations, I feel like, as well. But I feel like growing up I was never really praised for my looks by my peers, at least.
No homo, man, but you're good looking. It's just simple like that. I know people would be like, oh, he's half, you need to be Caucasian and Asian to look really good. That's not the case, man. Like, I think when there's two different genes mixed together and two different facial structures mixed together, I think that's also the beauty of it. How does it form? And being half is cool sometimes. I'm sorry, I'm not saying I'm cool, but I'm just saying sometimes being half is cool.
Actually, in China, it's very common for white people or half Chinese, half white people to get taken pictures of or want to be taken pictures of with in public, just randomly. Sure. Like I have a lot of friends that are half Chinese, half white that like would be noticed differently in public and like kind of in an appreciative way. Whereas I don't think I got as much of that. But I think if I only had that experience, I would have had a really hard time. I feel like because I had the privilege to step out of that context as well and go to a different context where I'm viewed in different ways.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like I understand my worth, or like I feel more empowered sometimes as well.
It's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. I never thought about it, but I have had the same experience. Not like here, but if you go to Japan, Japanese people or anyone wouldn't see you. You wouldn't be as attractive as a mixed, as he said, and this kind of actually puts you down. You think, oh, I must be ugly, but that's not the case. Because I was brought up in Pakistan, so I didn't have this issue. People saw me as more unique in Pakistan because there is really few half Pakistani and half East Asian or any other race, I guess. So for me, I also have a privilege, and I'm grateful for that.
I think for people who are oftentimes judged appearance-wise only, it's very easy to start to believe that appearance-wise is directly correlated to value, right? If the outside world says I'm attractive and you know the beauty standard, then you start to think like I, as an individual, as a person, my value is also this high, which is not true at all. You know, how you appear and who you really are, they're not necessarily
correlating
the same thing in value, who you are as value. So you're saying you want to keep that space around you, a positive space.
Yes.
So obviously, if anybody looks into you, they're gonna see that you do music as well. You consider yourself singer-songwriter?
Yes.
What was the kickstart?
I should have a story to share. I got my musical gene definitely from my dad.
Yeah, that's cool. He's got a passion, he's creating music. Because I know someone who wants to create music, and it's just fascinating how you take every one instrument, put it into the software like Logic Pro or GarageBand and create that, and it's pretty hard, man. People don't understand how hard it is to make music.
As a musician, I've definitely thought about like my purpose as well. I want other kids like me out there to feel inspired to be able to do anything that they want or they feel passionate about.
So you say you're taking a break from school.
Yes.
You're in Korea now.
Yes.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes. The main reason is that I will be enlisting in the Korean Army. I'm going to Kundae very soon in 3 days.
What the hell is wrong with me?
Oh, I'll be watching the second part also. That was pretty cool. When it comes out, I guess I'll watch the second part. But yeah, this was a really interesting video. It makes me think about things that I haven't thought about, like how he said about the Eurocentric beauty standard, which is true, you come across it, but I didn't think about it specifically. I guess I relate with him quite a bit. Aside that, I mean, he's a chill guy, good looking, creates music. I mean, what else do you want, man? But nah, you do come across a lot of struggles when you're mixed, and hopefully, what's your name, man? Hopefully, if you're watching Himang, then hopefully you're doing good, man. And best of luck for the future. I'll be watching the second part also. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe and hit that notification button. And I'll see you in the next video. Ja, mata ne.